So it's time to start our first lecture on sociology and human sexuality. And the first chapter is oriented towards helping you understand how sociologists think and how they develop what's known as sociological paradigms. A paradigm is a way of understanding the world, a way of organizing one's thoughts. And so in sociology, there's three theoretical paradigms. The three theoretical paradigms are structural functionalism, conflict or the power paradigm, similar to Marxism, and social construction, or what's also sometimes thought of as symbolic interaction. So we're going to be looking at those three different theoretical paradigms and using them to try to understand some basic social phenomena concerning human sexuality. Sociologists talk in terms of seeing the sociological in everyday life. There is a term for that. It's called the sociological imagination. So I like to talk in terms of using the lens of the sociologist. In other words, it's like putting on a pair of sociology goggles. You examine the world around you in light of how sociology would allow you to create a framework for thinking about your observations. So during this semester, we'll be talking about human sexuality, and we'll refer back to the theoretical paradigms that a sociologist would use. We'll be examining human sexuality using those theoretical paradigms, so it will help if we start out talking about those paradigms. Those three theoretical paradigms are structural functionalism, conflict or power, and symbolic interaction, sometimes also referred to as social construction, the two micro-paradigms. Thinking a little deeper in terms of what sociology does, I tell students to think in terms of taking the word and breaking it into its roots, socio and ology. Socio refers to greater than one, so it could be as small as two individuals, or it could be as great as the entire human population on the planet. Ology, on the other hand, means study of. And of course, both of these derive from Latin, as does much of science. Sociology then means that we're using science to explore, and that means we're developing a hypothesis, testing the hypothesis, and then finding out whether the hypothesis is true or null. And of course, theory strives to do three things: to describe, to explain, and to predict. The next aspect of this is that I want you to understand is what is a paradigm. A paradigm is sort of like a meta-theory. It is what is over the theory. It helps guide the theory building. It's a way of seeing the world, and from that the concepts are woven together to create a thought pattern. And so sociology has three dominant paradigms, that is, structural functionalism, conflict or power, and symbolic interaction or social construction. So we'll be starting with structural functionalism. This paradigm sees society as a complex system whose parts work together to promote solidarity and stability. And the key concepts I want you to hold on to and keep thinking about, those two key concepts are solidarity and stability. Solidarity considers what binds us together, or what allows society to hang together. Some of the key concepts here are things like norms and culture. We have to have agreed ways of doing things and agreed goals. And just to get to that point, we have to have a way of communicating these ideas, so we have to have language that we share. The manner in which solidarity is built is very complex. I'm just giving you some very basic ideas to ponder here. And then there's also the notion of stability. Without stability, our world becomes chaotic, and it becomes difficult to make choices and make decisions. Stability is comforting and allows us to function. The opposite of that is chaos, and no one wants to live in a chaotic state. We don't thrive very well amidst chaos. Some of the other presumptions in the structural functionalist paradigm are the ideas that life is guided by social structure, and that there are also relatively stable patterns of social behavior. And then a final presumption is that we can understand society in terms of its functions. And this is an important premise to understand, particularly when we get to Unit 3 and we're looking at social institutions. These social institutions are things like family, education, medicine, economy, religion, political, media, to name just the main ones. And the premise is that these institutions exist to fulfill certain necessary functions of society. And to help you understand this idea, there's an analogy that is often used here. That's an analogy to the body. The idea here is that we know that to have a healthy body, we have to have organs that can do their jobs. The heart, the liver, the brain, the lungs, skin, these are all organs that need to work properly. And if they don't, the body overall becomes unhealthy. So the analogy back to society, that is that we have to have social institutions that are functioning right. If we don't, then society is going to have problems. So our social structures should help maintain stability and structure, and these institutions must fulfill the needs of society. And there's also a presumption that all our actions serve a purpose. From the handshake when we greet each other to the way that we do our family life, these behaviors don't just happen by accident, but instead our social lives are created and maintained specifically so that they can achieve the needed functions of society. The classical theorists, and that means they have been around for quite a while, are Auguste Comte, Herbert Spencer, and Emile Durkheim. They all considered society and what was needed for society to function properly. The contemporary theorist that really fleshed out the structural functionalist paradigm was Talcott Parsons. He was a prolific writer and he was very influential in the 1950s, and hence his way of understanding society was heavily drawn on by Lyndon Johnson when LBJ was creating his Great Society. But at the same time that the President Johnson was using structural functionalism to help develop social policy, there was much criticism of structural functionalism because it didn't seem to be addressing the social tensions and the unrest of the 1960s. It was seen as being too limited in its understanding of society. Emile Durkheim also emphasized in his writing the need to understand the idea of solidarity, or what allows society to hang together. He wanted to understand what brings people together and what allows them to function as a group. But it was Parsons that fully developed the paradigm, and his ideas were very appealing. His analysis had incredible depth, and it was very complex. And it was Parsons that explained this idea that all societies had basic tasks that needed to be handled, and that our social institutions allowed society to achieve those tasks. So structural functionalism might look at human sexuality and consider specific questions because of the manner in which the paradigm creates a framework for thinking about those social issues. So structural functionalism might look at human sexuality and consider specific questions because of the manner in which the paradigm creates a framework for thinking about those social issues. It might ask, is society better off having mothers as the primary parent because mothers are natural nurturers? And I'm not suggesting this is the case. I'm just saying it might lend itself well to studying under the structural functionalist paradigm. Or it might study the two-parent family and look at whether a one-parent family, or for that matter an extended family, might fit the needs of society better. And in general, it might ask what social functions are fulfilled through sexuality and related behaviors.